In discussions of Japanese and Western role-playing games, something I see people frequently talk about is the differences in the stories. Usually, someone brings up the grand list of console RPG cliches, and someone else says something about religion, and another person brings up metrosexual pretty boys with big swords. While these conversations can be amusing, I think very few of these people actually understand the differences between stories created by the Japanese and stories created by Americans. Oh sure, some people claim it's Western storytelling, but let's be honest here. It's not. It's American storytelling. Western would mean it includes Canada, South America, and European countries like Greece and Ireland. And I can assure you there are lots of different storytelling models more native to these regions than Joseph Campbell's monomyth. Monomyth is a uniquely American creation and primarily used only by the American film and television industry. It does find its way into some non-American productions, but we're the only country who considers it the only story structure in town. So this video is designed to give you a crash course in the differences between American storytelling and Japanese storytelling. I will ask you to note that I myself am not Japanese, and my information comes from what I've learned about Japanese culture from websites and books, and not from actually being part of Japanese culture. So my explanations may not be 100% accurate. Still, I think I have a pretty good understanding of the basics, which many other game reviewers do not have, and someone has got to try to put a stop to the insanity, so it might as well be me. Let's begin. Something that is often lost in translation between American and Japanese storytelling is that the narratives have different models. Right now, American television shows almost always follow a 4-act structure, which is a modified version of the 3-act structure described in Aristotle's Poetics. This is not the case in Japan. The Japanese historically have used a narrative structure descending from Japanese theater plays. Now, I'm not an expert in this area, but from what I gather, classical Japanese narrative structure revolves around the concept of Joha-kyo, which is very roughly translated as beginning, break, rapid. Joha-kyo is an important concept in Japanese culture and promotes the idea that all actions should begin slowly, quickly speed up, and then come to a swift end. If applied literally to plot structure, it would mean stories have 3 acts. However, this is not how Joha-kyo tends to be used for narration. Instead, the Japanese tend to use a 5-act structure for stories, incorporating the Joha-kyo ideal. Act 1 usually consists of things being very slowly paced and everything going well for the protagonist. Act 2 introduces tension and conflict into the story. The climax of the drama occurs in Act 3. This is where the story attempts to appeal emotionally to the audience. Act 4 is supposed to ease out of the intense drama from Act 3. The 5th and final act restores the protagonist back to their peaceful, everyday existence, or at least how they were at the start of the story in Act 1. In comparison, American television shows tend to use the 4-act structure. Act 1 consists of establishing the characters and mood for the rest of the story. The goals of the protagonist are also firmly established. Act 2 has the protagonist encountering a small obstacle on the path to reaching the goal, but they will easily clear that obstacle. Act 3 has the protagonist trip over a stumbling block, allowing the antagonist to win. The protagonist usually makes a mistake, are defeated, or otherwise can't win. All hope may seem lost for them. Act 4 consists of the protagonist making a comeback and defeating the antagonist. As I said before, we Americans are really obsessed with monomyth, and that works its way into our stories too. Monomyth, for those who don't know, is a narrative model created by Joseph Campbell and detailed in his book Hero of a Thousand Faces. Monomyth is also known as the hero's journey. I'm not going to go into terrible detail about it, but in short, it's a 3-act structure where each act has 5 to 6 sub-acts. In each sub-act, the protagonist encounters character archetypes borrowed from Jungian psychology. The archetypes are supposed to represent aspects of the protagonist's personality, or even what the protagonist might become if he screws up. In short, watch Star Wars. Star Wars was written to perfectly conform to the monomyth structure, which is why so many movies today are basically Star Wars in a different genre. If you're really interested in hearing more about monomyth structure, I encourage you to pick up The Writer's Journey: Mythic Structure for Writers by Christopher Vogler. It's pretty much the gold standard book on the topic. Anyway, the differences between American and Japanese plot structures means the first act of a work using Joha-kyo doesn't set the mood for the rest of the story, and the character's goals may not even be firmly established in Act 1. The drama of the second act is usually minor, with the protagonist and antagonist's goals firmly decided in the third act when things are most intense. Because of these differences, Japanese media such as anime can appear to the unaware as if they have random plots with no structure, when they actually do. But this is important information to be aware of if you watch, read, or play Japanese media, because since they are Japanese creations, they usually use a Japanese plot structure. Take Ultraman, for example. To greatly summarize things, a typical Ultraman plot involves people talking for Act 1, Act 2 showing the Monster of the Week attack random people, Act 3 involves a fight between Ultraman and the Monster of the Week, and Ultraman defeating the monster in Act 4. The episode ends in Act 5 with Ultraman's alter ego surrounded by his friends pretending he's not Ultraman, or otherwise engaged in whatever he was doing at the start of the episode. You can also see this type of plot structure in a lot of Power Rangers, and Power Rangers, of course, is based off Super Sentai. Before I finish, I need to point out that it's very important to understand there are exceptions. Not every Japanese story follows Johakyo, and not every American story uses monomyth. But the majority of them do because these narrative models are part of the cultural identity of these countries. Now that I've created this video, I'm going to start referring to it when people argue with me that they understand the differences between Japanese stories and American stories, but clearly don't. It really has nothing to do with rainbow-colored hair or pretty boy elves or whatever. Those are elements of stories that belong to specific genres, like shonen and fantasy or whatever, and don't necessarily have anything to do with the narrative model. You can use these narrative models to make a story in any genre because they are universal.